Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and we're here for a special pre-trade deadline short, talking about tonight what makes a good trade candidate. Now, I know any player you want makes a good trade candidate to many folks who are out there. But Brian McFarland is here and going to talk with us a little bit about what makes a good trade candidate and some names that might make sense for the Ravens this time around. Brian, great to have you, first of all.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ken. Always a good time.
Always fun. And we just went over the roster in full detail during the bye week. I thought that was a ton of fun. Always a lot of good information there from you. Trade deadline is 4 p.m. on Tuesday. The Ravens, we thought this might be a very different show. You know, a couple of weeks ago, we thought we might be talking about the Ravens being sellers. Really, actually, like what? 8 days ago, I guess.
Yeah.
So the Ravens might be sellers.
Yeah. Two wins in 4 days, basically 4 or 5 days, makes a huge difference. Yeah.
And even with the Steelers' kind of unfortunate upset today, it still puts them in I think, in a pretty good position to still win the division. They've certainly reestablished themselves in a way. But the Ravens have to be very careful, like all teams do at this time of year, about the scarce resources that are present. Do you want to take us through this?
Sure. So they've got they have but they have a lot of draft picks. They're slated for a lot of draft picks. Not a lot of high draft picks. So they have their own first through fifth round picks. They're presently scheduled adding. They've got a fifth from the Jets, from a trade during the last April's draft. They've got a fifth from the Chargers, which was part of the OA trade. And then they are expected for Makari and Brandon Stevens. We're expecting 2 5th-round comps. Assuming those guys stay healthy, they're going to be stuck right there. They just picked up a 6th in the Alexander trade, and they may or may not, and this will come down to playing time for guys, but they may still get 2 7th-round comps, one for Tre'Davious White, who I didn't see how much he played today, but he's been playing a decent amount. He's been healthy and playing a decent amount in Buffalo. And then Josh Jones, the backup left tackle. Now, he's not playing a lot, but his contract is a little more firmly in that 7th round. So if the more he gets a chance to play, the more that will be secure. So they could have, right now, you expect I'll have 10. They could have 12 if those 2 7ths come through. I don't think it's going to happen, but if Cooper Rush starts playing at some point, that will potentially cancel one of those 7ths, because that would make him qualify with more playing time. So, but 5 of them, or 6 of them, 7, 8. I guess 7 to 8 could be in the 5th through the 7th round. So that doesn't leave a whole lot of big ticket items as far as trade value.
Let's go back to the Rush pick for a second. The Rush pick would cancel out a 7th in the comp formula. Would it possibly cancel out something higher if the Ravens don't get those 2 7ths?
Well, yes. I mean, it could potentially, if the other 2 didn't qualify, if they fell out of the qualifying, then potentially it could. I mean, I don't think we have to worry about it, because I don't think Rush is going to see the field, except if something happens to the 2 that are. And who knows, his roster spot could be potentially at risk with some trade additions. Who's got to go, and that's a spot. I mean, they generally haven't carried 3 quarterbacks in the past, so they are right now. I mean, they've already invested in them, but at this point it's a sunk cost. So, and it's guaranteed money, so he's going to get paid whether he's here or not. So it's not, it's just one of those things. Sometimes you got to punt and move on, and that could be a roster spot that they could need if they acquire multiple players.
So the draft capital, and it could even be for future years as well. So they have a lot of draft picks like next year. Great. They do need a bunch. They've got a bunch of people leaving the team.
Yeah.
But in addition, there is potentially more draft capital even available than what they would have in 2026 available for trade. Now,
Yeah,
it's
I
not
mean, they
something the
have
Ravens have typically done.
no, yeah, I mean, they certainly could, they could move into 27. I think they only have 6 picks, 6 or 7 picks in 27
Yeah, they
right
just traded
now.
the Alexander pick this in
Right, right.
27.
That was one, and then there was the Tre'Davious White trade was also a seventh round pick. That's an interesting one that they basically got him for a seventh and a swap, a seventh a year, and then gave up a seventh a year later. They could end up getting a seventh back. So this year, so it would basically it would offset the one they gave up in the 26 pick. So just one of those funny kind of cyclical things.
Do they have the 2/7 necessary to complete both of those trades, the Alexander trade and the Tre'Davious White trade, or the Tre'Davious White trade is another seventh they're getting?
The they don't have a they gave up a seventh. So what they did, let's see, so trying to remember. So they got a pick, they gave up a pick in this past draft, and they got a seventh. Of course, they traded that one in the OA trade. So that's where that. So they got it. They gave up the six last year, and they got a seventh this year. I think that's right. I had it written down somewhere, but I'm not sure where that was anymore. So yeah, but they end up the one they traded away, they basically could be getting back by him leaving and getting a comp pick. So
Okay. All right. Um, so they have the draft capital involved is certainly a very significant concern there. The other thing is the cap space for these players, obviously, and a significant concern. Some of the players you're picking up half their salary for the year. A lot of the players, that's a lot less than half their compensation.
yeah, because obviously the cap number is the salary and signing bonus proration. The signing bonus proration stays with the team they're coming from, the trading team. The new team only acquires the balance of the base salary. If there are per game roster bonuses, they would be the new team would be paying them as well. But those usually aren't, in most players, they might have even a couple of 500,000 in per game roster bonuses is 50, 60,000, so that's not a per game, so that's not usually a big amount to worry about. Maybe a little more depending upon uh, the amount. But so yeah, so I mean, that's not going to be a whole lot. And then of course any full roster bonuses, the ones that are 500,000 or $1 million or $4 million, those were all paid back in March. So that the team that it's trading and has already paid that, so that's their problem, so to speak. That's going to hit on their cap. So you're really just looking at base salary and any per game roster bonuses.
Now, we were just talking off air for a second beforehand. Occasionally, a player will have a future roster bonus that hasn't been paid out and that may not be entirely clear. And OTC, definitely a source I usually go to for this kind of thing, but they don't always have that separated out between one that's already been paid and the prorated, accruals of that. Accruals, I don't know if that's the correct term in this case, or one that is yet to be paid, and then has a waterfall of prorations that goes with
Yeah.
that. It's not accruals, prorations.
Yeah, and it's at this point, any sizable roster bonus it may not have been paid because it might get paid out over the season, but it was triggered back in March or April or June, and now a lot of teams are actually doing them as of basically September 1. But so that while the payout scale, maybe not the right word, but payout scale
Schedule.
might be um that they're still getting paid, that it was once it's triggered, the team the team that's trading them, it's still, again, on their ledger, not on the Ravens.
Okay. All right. And then I think the third thing, and you just kind of mentioned it briefly before with when you're talking about Cooper Rush, the third scarce resource is roster spots. And the Ravens right now are flush in terms of players against the limit that they have. So they have to get rid of somebody if they acquire someone. The Jalen, we haven't talked about the Jair Alexander trade yet, but that actually, one of the nice benefits of it was it created a roster spot that'll probably be needed to add Keandre Jackson to the roster because he's had 3 elevations already.
Yeah, and they probably, I mean, they don't have to do that yet, obviously. They're probably going to leave that open because it could be there for a trade acquisition too. And then they'll figure out the rest from there, um, I mean, Jackson obviously has been active the last 3 games. So whether they need to do something there or, I obviously you get to the calculus of every week and, guys that are hurt and, whether they're going to, the inactives, how that's going to factor in. But if everybody's healthy, it obviously creates a squeeze, and it might be that Jackson has to stay on the practice squad for a week or two if they acquire, someone else.
Right, and they've been active. Taven Bryan, I think, has been up now twice, right?
Twice, yeah.
Yeah, so he's got one more, but they've got limitations. Voss and I talk about that every week on Friday Morning GM. So
Yeah, and there's another option which they've done in the past, and um that could be releasing a guy like Brent Urban. I think he had 1 elevation earlier in the year, so he would still have 2 more to go.
okay,
And he could, re-sign him back to the practice squad, and then,
gotcha.
play those roster gymnastics to an extent. And at some point, they would probably, once an injury or something happens, they probably would bring him back to the full roster. He's going to get paid, so it's because well, wait a minute, he started the season on the practice squad, didn't
Yes,
he?
he did.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
he doesn't have termination pay. So that could be something they could do for a couple weeks, and kind of play the juggling act.
Yeah, I tell you what, Urban has been the ultimate good soldier, but after the game he just had, where he's terrific in this last game, I thought, then I just don't see the Ravens doing it.
And maybe not. I mean, that was just one option,
Yeah.
out there, depending upon who they fingers crossed acquire and how many. Obviously, the more they acquire, the more open spaces they're going to need, or spaces they're going to have to open, I guess, maybe a better way of saying it.
Yeah. I mean, it's really strange, but with Urban, I think he just changed the whole question about what they do with him for the rest of the season to will he be back in 2026 after the game he just had. I mean, he's really he's a big deal. The Ravens right now, they're playing this uncovered nickel. They have a lot of snaps. They only want 1 outside linebacker on the field, and the only guy who really makes sense to play outside the tackle shoulder on those plays is Urban. And I mean, I guess Taven Bryan probably could do it too, but Urban is really the kind of the natural run defender who plays there. And then they put somebody smaller, usually outside him, whether that's Hamilton or Buchanan. But it's he's awfully valuable right now to this team.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we had a trade of Jair Alexander today. Just quick hit on that. I thought pretty decent compensation to get a 6th for him. And essentially that's what that is. It's a 6th round pick next year, a 7th a year following. That has almost no value relative to that 6th, particularly with any kind of discounting from you, dear, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's he was languishing on the bench. I mean, I think it's kind of doing him a solid as well, giving him, maybe a place because of injuries. He's got more of an opportunity to see the field. Fingers crossed. Our top 3 guys stay healthy, and we don't, regret that in sometime in December. That we've traded from depth, but and it saves them $1 million on the cap, which will be offset by whoever ends up coming in. So, but every little bit helps, and they're in a pretty good position right now, cap space wise, to to move forward on a trade. Basically, they've got about a little over 15 million in space, which is they generally do not have at this time of year. Now,
Right.
the OA trade did a lot of that, because I think the OA trade was about 8 million cleared, I think, if I remember correctly. Once you brought Gilman in, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I mean, they're in a position, they can, money wise, they can swing big.
Okay.
Not sure there's
And
a big out there, but
yeah, we've talked about this on other shows, and I don't want to go too much into this, but is it fair to say that some of that money they really need to roll forward with in order to keep their own house in order next year with Lamar Jackson's contract ballooning and whatnot?
I mean, it would certainly be nice, and obviously they're at this. It would be nice to be, you know, 5-3 instead of 3-5, and then you're thinking about, quote unquote, you're going to be in the playoffs, barring something terrible. Um, so you can kind of plan that more now. They're a little more in, if we do this and we don't make it, then we've used up a lot of money on perhaps a guy who's going to, we'll talk about guys in particular, but a guy with an expiring contract. And now we don't have anything, now we've used up some of that cap space we would have liked to have rolled over, and it didn't work because here we are, we didn't make the playoffs.
So you just kind of got into it a little bit. Kind of the perfect guy you're looking for on the trade deadline is going to be a UFA, and this works in baseball too. But a guy who's effectively a rental, as we'll call it. And Roquan was that. The Ravens ended up re-signing him during that 2022 season, but they're looking for a guy, guys that have a lot of trade value, or same kind of guys the Ravens have right now on their own roster, and Travis Jones and Isaiah Likely and Tyler Linderbaum, who are going to be pending free agents. It really. You look at the Ravens roster, they have some of the most tradable commodities in the entire game. When I look at other teams, there just aren't other teams that have, three really big names like what the Ravens have.
Yeah. Yeah, and Marcus Peters was another guy they acquired by trade, and then before the end of the season extended him. So I mean, that's obviously you need to see the fit, how not just scheme wise, but personality wise and things like that. But so if they are acquiring, especially if it was a younger pass rusher, I would think they would be acquiring him with the thought of, we're going to extend him. And of course, it depends on, obviously, the more trade compensation you give, the more you're going to want to extend them, just to, make it worth it into the future.
Yeah. And in a lot of cases, the better the player is, you kind of have a division of value in the draft compensation they demand between what he's going to do this year and a premium for having a period to sign that guy.
Mhm.
And I don't think of the Ravens as being an organization that typically likes to pay that premium, but they did with Roquan. I think so anyway. It's kind of hard to say, because the other component of it is sometimes the team that trades him to you will eat some of the remaining money in the contract if they can afford to, and you end up paying a slight premium for that as well.
Yeah.
Did I miss any components? Those are the big
No,
three.
that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's talk maybe about needs for the Ravens this year. We can roll down a few names. I know that's what people are really interested in hearing. To me, the biggest need on the team currently is the unaddressed non-replacement of Tavius Robinson. And I know this doesn't seem real exciting to people, but Tavius Robinson, tremendous versatility, could play outside linebacker, rush the passer a little bit, which is always good, kick inside when you need him to, which is versatility value, played a ton of snaps, and played the run very well. And that's the guy the Ravens are really missing right now. That's why they're having to go to all these Mickey Mouse defenses to try and I'm not talking about Big Nickel. Big Nickel's great. I want that, and I want Tavius Robinson.
Right.
But I'm talking about uncovered nickel. When you play only one outside linebacker on the field, that's not the Ravens' way.
Right.
So that's number one for me. What's your second position? Maybe let's you hammer it on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, anywhere along the defensive line, anybody who can, not too strong of a word, but
you could have stopped at anybody.
Yeah, well, but I mean, somebody who can plausibly, I'm trying to come up with the right word, but that, they can step in for Matabike. Obviously not going to be Matabike, but they can replace those snaps at a high level. Not sure you're going to get a guy. I mean, there's some guys, there's some names bandied about, whether they're available or not, who knows. Lawrence and the Giants, Williams with the Jets. And those are the bigger names, obviously. And of course, everybody focuses on the bigger names, and then gets disappointed when they, end up trading for a lesser person because the big name wasn't available in the first place. But so that, and a veteran guard might be a good idea. Now, whether which guard they want to pull the plug on, I don't know. Who has to, who on the offensive line goes off the roster at that point. Another question. I mean, I guess if they brought a guard in, it would be Ben Cleveland, just because
Right.
he hasn't seen the field and the other two are starters. So if one of them is going to go to the bench, Cleveland would get pushed further down. So I guess he would be the guy. For whatever reason, I'm still shocked he resigned here, and I'm guessing he's probably regretting it since he hasn't seen the field. But um, so it just, I don't know, it's never been a good fit for them. So that's why it was kind of surprising that he resigned. But so yeah, those are probably the three main positions. You don't need tight ends, you don't need wide receivers, you don't need running backs. So offense, that's done. I don't think you need any more defensive backs. So you just traded one. So and the linebackers are starting to, Buchanan starting to, round into form. So I mean, at depth, maybe a depth guy there, cover, but that's not going to cost you much, if even that. So, but yeah, I think those three. I mean, whether it's edge, interior defensive line and interior offensive line are probably the three.
I'm with you on there. I think that adding the guard to the current roster gets extremely tricky. It's not just in terms of who can they get. I mean, Kevin Zeitler's name always comes up when you talk guard, and I don't know how much better he is right now than Ben Cleveland or Voorhees. Voorhees actually playing pretty well here the last few weeks, so I think he might be a guy that they really want to lean into rather
Hmm.
than out of.
You're right.
Uh, Falele, you got a multiple issues here. So first of all, Falele, a much better pass blocker than he is a run blocker. So the pass blocking is also, as it happens, much more important than the run blocking. PFF doesn't add it up that way. They go, in fact, in the opposite direction with the run blocking being a higher weight for a guard. Totally don't agree with it, but anyway, it is what it is. The point I'm making here is that whoever they get, and you're gonna go out and you're gonna pay some sort of premium for half their season, the rest of this year. You better make sure they're an upgrade on Daniel Falele if you bring him in. I'm just not sure that Kevin Zeitler is right now. Daniel Falele is one of the better pass blocking guards in the league, and I just, as awful as he can look on an individual play basis, he has a pretty good hit rate.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously he's kind of been the whipping boy, so to speak, for the offensive lines. And I guess when he whiffs really badly. you know. So yeah, I mean obviously Zeitler's the name that, everybody seems to be talking about as far as that spot. And of course he's in Tennessee and they're, one of the worst teams in the league. So, but they've also, they've got a rookie quarterback, and do you really want to, if Zeitler is playing well, or or whoever they have to, take that spot, they're not going to feel comfortable with. You don't want to get you want your give your rookie quarterback as much opportunity to succeed, and stripping away offensive linemen isn't generally, the way to do that. So, whether he's available, we'll see. Um, I personally wouldn't mind having a reunion with them, and letting them figure it out from there. Um, but because he's not gonna, I mean, you're not gonna. It's gonna be a late round pick or a late round pick swap even. So
Where
it's
do you
not.
think Zeitler would fit? I mean, six straight up or 6 for 7? What do you think?
Well, yeah, they now that they have the six, because for a while it was kind of, they technically don't have any sevenths. Um, so it was a fifth. So I was thinking a fifth, and you get a sixth or seventh back. So, and since they have so many fifths, but now they have a sixth. So I mean, I think so. You trade a fifth, get a seventh back. It basically is a sixth. Now they have a sixth. So um, I think that is somewhere in there, whether it's a pick swap or it's a six straight up. With the number of picks they have, again, it's not gonna hurt them in the long run. And if he's a guy you can bring in, and if he does solidify the offensive line, if they think that, that's that he will, then, I think it's well worth it.
Things would have been a lot easier if they had not DNFI'd Emory Jones. And Emory Jones, my own personal belief is he will not contribute in any meaningful way to the 2025 Ravens.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they did that. Obviously to get him on the practice field, because you can't, you can rehab, but you can't actually practice with the team. But I'm surprised they didn't wait longer,
Mhm.
to let him. I mean, because he couldn't even, they couldn't even. They were worried about his shoulders still. So
Mhm.
clearly, while he was sort of cleared, he wasn't fully cleared. I don't, or he's cleared for some things and not others. So yeah, I think that was a little premature for sure.
Yeah. And it would give them an option right now to go further with it. And maybe you could tell me a little bit because I've been kind of flying in the dark about this, but if the team wants to keep a player on NFI and he says, "Hold on, I'm ready. I'm not hurt anymore. I'm ready to play." What recourse does that player have towards saying, you got to add me to the roster, or I'll file they have a grievance, or what?
Yeah,
What?
yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a grievance. It's the same thing for play. I mean, um, if you have, obviously, we know they put some guys. Obviously, the timing of guys that went on um, IR before the season started, and those guys are done for the year. But guys that aren't done for the year, if they are healthy, you either have to, once they are healthy and they're eligible, you either have to put them on the 53 or cut them.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of the, your guys that are not going to be necessarily contributors this year anyway, they're happy to sit on, because if you cut them, they're not getting paid. If they can pass a physical, you can cut them from IR, or you do an injury settlement. You'll be healthy in a couple of weeks, and so we'll pay you for the next 2 weeks, and we're done with you. So there's those options there, but yeah, I mean, a player can force it if need be. Rarely does it happen because usually you are activating him, or again, it's a younger fifth or sixth round pick who's not really going to contribute. So they're generally happy to stay on IR all year, get their check, and then get stronger and be ready to go next spring.
Okay. You're talking about IR, and I'm really talking about NFI
Well, they
in this
work the same.
particular.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, they basically work the same.
But except in the NFI case, I don't know what the deal was with Emory Jones, what they were paying him. Like, it's on book, but they have the right to pay him some additional money, as I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, they can pay him if you're on NFI, you can be paid nothing.
Mhm.
But they did pay him what's called the down salary, which is the IR salary. So instead of the 840 is the rookie minimum
Mhm.
for that's the season. Of course, you divide it by 18. So was getting the down amount, which I believe is about 500,000. So he was
Okay.
getting a 1/18 of 500. So they were paying him. Sometime there've been times they haven't in the past paid players on NFI, but usually there's a reason, because when you draft a guy who is hurt, it's kind of hard to put him on NFI.
Right.
Um, Sometimes it happens, but NFI often is more for the guy that you know has a skiing accident or something like that, and the team's
Mhm.
pissed off, and
Right.
that's why they're not paying him.
So going back a couple of years to Voorhees, because he's the famous full year
Right.
NFI guy who redshirted. The Ravens
Hmm.
probably paid him roughly, or 500,000 or 500,000 at whatever the
Yeah, it was
equivalent would have been that
in the
year.
fours that year. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's good to know, and I want to make sure I'm explaining it properly. Do you think that there's anything Emory Jones did likely to force the situation this year, to force the Ravens to activate him when they did, or do you think the Ravens really felt like, hey, he might only be 3 weeks away?
I'm going to lean towards I mean, because they knew when they put him on NFI and going into the season, they knew that whether it's going to be 4 weeks or 5 or 6, they knew he was going to. I mean, they were hoping he was going to come back. So, um, though it does seem that they may have, and maybe by now they would have had to anyway. But it does seem like doing it after the 4 weeks and getting that 21-day practice period started was probably a little premature when he can't pass block because he can't use his shoulders yet.
Right. Okay. I'm in the same place. Obviously, the big payoff, the big, uh, Tootsie Roll in the middle of the Tootsie Pop here is if you can get them all the way through the season on NFI, then you keep the year of eligible team control, we'll call it.
Mhm.
And that would have been the big payoff. And I'm just wondering if there's any way the Ravens could have come to a financial agreement with Emory Jones about that to make it worth.
Let me tell you about the online cannabis company that's changing the game, Mood.com. They created an entirely line of functional gummies. 100% federally legal THC blends discreetly delivered right to your doorstep. And here's the best part. You can get 20% off your first order at mood.com with the promo code RAVENS. Now, I've tried a bunch of their gummies myself. Each one's totally unique. The Sleepy Time gummies knock me out right away. They help me unwind fast, leave me refreshed the next morning. The Epic Euphoria gummies, they're perfect for when your day just isn't going the way you want it to go. What makes Mood special is how they pair the THC with natural herbs and adaptogens. You won't find blends like this at any local shop. They've got gummies designed for focus, relaxation, clarity, even energy, all made from cannabis grown on small, family-owned American farms. No pesticides, no shortcuts, just high-quality weed you can trust. Plus, Mood backs everything with a 100-day satisfaction guarantee. So head on over to mood.com, check out their amazing selection, and don't forget to use the promo code RAVENS at checkout to save 20% off your first order.
Both their wiles. Like, could they
No,
pay
because you're either on NFI. I mean, if you're on NFI, you don't have to be paid. They did. I mean, I guess they did pay him the down salary, so there's that. But beyond that, once it's I mean, his contract calls for if he's on a reserve list to get the down amount. So, I mean, I guess in theory, if they could say, well, we'll pay you the full amount.
That's what
The
that's
full
what I'm asking.
weekly amount up to the 840, the 1/18th of 840. I mean, I guess they could have done that.
So Emory Jones makes another 300,000 on the year, 300 and change, and he's happy with the arrangement given the fact that he's had surgery too. He wants to go through the rehab, but he understands the wisdom of the Ravens having the extra year control.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. So let's talk about some possible trade targets out there, and we're going to go through these quickly. And I'll tell you what. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a discussion with Voss about who he thinks are the best candidates for the Ravens on a special Friday morning GM trade edition. But we're going to talk about some of these, and I want to get into maybe some of the contractual stumbling blocks with Brian. The first is Jalen Phillips of Miami, and by the way, toss in anybody else from Miami that you put in that category. I think you mentioned Bradley Chubb when we were talking earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I think the three guys in Miami probably are Chubb, Phillips, and Judon. And obviously we always bring up ex-Ravens and, guys we used to like and things like that. If they're going to move somebody, obviously Judon is the easiest one to get. And not much of a deal there, small deal. They've got the cap space for it. In theory, he's comfortable here. He knows the area, so it's not a lot of ramp up, and you're bringing him in to rush the passer. So just go, pin your ears back and go get him, kind of thing. But so I mean, he's a possibility. Phillips is he's playing on his 5th-year option of about a little over 13 million. So it's basically you're acquiring Owe back, as far as the money goes. But obviously a few weeks later, and that is something. So we're halfway in. So you're looking at, for him, about 6.5 million from here. That could be something that you could get Miami to potentially pay, two of that or 3 of that.
If you do that, you probably have to bump the draft compensation.
You probably have to bump it around, yeah.
So just your guess on what it would take to get Phillips.
Probably, he's got 3 sacks this year. He's been playing a lot. He's been playing almost 73% of their snaps. So you'd kind of like him to have more than 3 sacks at this point when you're playing that much. Now, obviously, that team is a mess to start with. So, I mean, I think you probably could get him for a third, and because it's an expiring contract, so a third, and we throw in a 6th. Maybe, or again, you're swapping picks in there, so you give a 5th, but you get a 6th or 7th back, so a 3rd and a 5th, and then get a pick back with him. Those kinds of things. I mean, if you're gonna ask him for money, and that obviously it depends on if they are gonna make multiple moves, and usually teams don't at the trade deadline. So, I guess I would say to people listening that don't expect 3 trades. If they
Right.
make 2, that would be, out of the ordinary. Um, Especially if they're on the bigger side, quote unquote. So yeah, I mean, maybe a third or fourth probably for him, depending upon what the money they might eat, and then what's, if there's going to be a lower pick added in there. Probably not a player, but you never know if you add a player in. Um, yeah, I think our last conversation we were talking about, the Owe trade was, kind of different because it was a player for player trade. It's a couple draft picks added in there. I don't know that they have anybody they'd want to subtract from the roster, but if some team says, well, we kind of like this guy, maybe that's where you can get a bigger name because you're trading a bigger name going in the other direction. One of the tight ends, just an example, because you've got 3. And they're all on expiring contracts. So if I'm just using Charlie Kohler as the example, but if a team said, well, we need a tight end, and we'll take Kohler and see how it goes, and maybe we'll re-sign him after this year, but we'll get him acclimated here and get to know him. I mean, that's certainly a thing that they could do from a position of strength, obviously.
Right. Okay. So that sounds too high to me, by the way. A third round pick for Jalen
Okay.
Phillips sounds too darn high, but that's okay. But I did want to know in from your position, if okay, no, this is what I want to know. Tavius Robinson right now is on IR, obviously. Miami probably doesn't care that he's on IR for the 2025 season, although they might want to replace Jalen Phillips' production and high snap count. Tavius would be kind of perfect for that. But they might want Tavius's production next year when he's on the 4th year of his rookie deal. Is he a guy that can be traded on IR, or when he's on IR, he can't be traded?
I believe he can be traded. He's still subject to the same rules. So obviously, the Ravens haven't really said when they expect him back. I don't think, at least unless I missed it. So, but yeah, I mean, it could be an option that you're kind of redshirting him for this year in Miami's case, and then we'll get a full year out of him next year, and maybe that balances out some of the draft pick and compensation, and makes things a little easier because, as you said, while he's not replacing this year's production, he is stepping in next year.
Okay. All right. We'll see what he goes for. Uh, Quincy Williams is a name that's up in New York, not Quinnen Williams. Quinnen Williams, the interior defender. Quincy Williams, who is he cousin, younger brother? Is he's I forget what he is exactly, how the two are related, but they are related. And Quincy is not a particularly good tackle. Doesn't really look like a replacement for Roquan, which could be something they'd be looking to acquire at the trade deadline if it were available as a player it's really more for 26 than for 25. But they feel fairly tenuous about their own playoff hopefulness this year, and they want to pick up value for next year as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's something you have to factor in. I didn't look up. Is he so he's under contract for next year?
I thought he was, but let me
Okay,
go ahead and check that out.
Yeah, I feel like he is, because he hasn't. It's a name that hasn't been bandied about, but it does provide them with depth.
No, he's not. He's on his expiring deal, but he could
He
be
is.
re-signed as a replacement for Roquan too, and he might be a kind of guy that would be under Roquan's 2026 number.
Yeah, because he's only 20. He's 29 now, but yeah. So, and the money, 6.5 million base salary, so you're getting a 3.25. So that's certainly workable. The Jets would have about 5 million in dead money on the cap next year by trading him. So yeah, I mean, from that's certainly workable. Um, that would be surprising, just because it's not something we've been focused on. But yes, I mean, that is the idea of, it gives you depth, and then potentially a replacement at certainly a cheaper rate than Roquan will be
Well,
next year.
and we got to be careful with that because I thought he was actually not a replacement for Roquan. Obviously, he might be a year older than Roquan, but he's basically the same age as Roquan.
Right.
And then your Roquan is $7.3 million of savings to cut him, but the rest of Roquan's salary, the $32.5 million or whatever his cap hit is next year, is already spent. There's no way.
It's the dead money's the dead money. I mean, you don't get around that. Yeah.
So anyway, I put Quincy's name out there to say no, this is not a guy who
right
because I've heard it. A guy I'm kind of interested in is Alex Wright of Cleveland, who's a UFA. He's on a very low contract, about $1.7 million remaining on his deal. And he's been a guy who's actually played pretty well this year, defensive interior guy. You don't have to have anything to say about him if you don't, but not an expensive contract anyway.
Yeah, I mean they're going to be looking at top to bottom things like that. I mean, obviously fans are focused on the big names that are going to change everything, but they're rarely out there. So they've got to decide who can come in and supplement, who they can get for the right price that can come in and supplement. And hopefully make a difference that way. But yeah, you're not going to get a 15. You're not getting a 15 sack a year guy. You're whether it's Hendrickson, who the Cincinnati will not trade here.
You're sure of that?
I highly doubt that, especially because we're fighting them for the division, perhaps. Of course, he's not. Their defense is so bad anyway. Even with him,
you saw what happened today.
Kind of crazy, yeah. So. And when you hear, I mean, Max Crosby's the name that always comes up. But I don't really, they've shown no inclination to even think about trading him. And he sounds like he doesn't want to be traded. Then of course, I mean, the guy I'd really love to get if you could swing for it would be Brian Burns from the Giants. He's got a lot of money left on his deal. But he's playing at a very high and a high rate at this point, and obviously the Giants aren't going anywhere, but they don't seem to be inclined to trade him either. Then you've got
Thibodeau,
the kid from Oregon, name just slipped my mind.
Not the Thibodeau,
Thibodeau, yeah. He'll be on his 5th year option next year. So, that may be, and of course they just drafted Abdul Carter. So, is there a luxury there that they could trade one of them? But I mean, Burns is going to take a first round, I would think no matter what. Thibodeau, probably not a first, but,
as soon as I hear the Giants saying they definitely want a first for Thibodeau and putting that in the news, that's a signal.
Yeah.
It's like a diplomatic signal.
Yeah.
Give me a second, please.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I'm trying to think. He's also playing 70% of the snaps, and he's got 2.5 sacks. So he had the one big year when he had almost 11.5 in 23, but then he was 5.5 last year, 2.5 this year, which basically amounts to about 5.5. So, I don't know that truly, I mean, it's a name because he was drafted high, but I don't know if that truly really will move the needle for them more, at the cost that it would probably take, as opposed to, a guy like Matt Judon or something like that. Is it going to be that much of a difference? The cost is going to definitely be different. So,
I mean, if you look at what they just did, 2-3 weeks ago, whatever it was, when they made the trade for Gilman and unloaded Owe was the team's best pass rusher. I mean, he's the guy who, has Thibodeau-esque production probably in terms of what you'd expect, a lot of pressures. And that is one of the things about Jalen Phillips. Maybe you're right. Maybe he does go for a 3. He does have a lot of pressures to go with those sacks. So it's possible that's a player that will be in some demand and maybe in a better situation would pick up more sacks. It's tough to say. Number of IDLs I want to talk about. Houston has 2 of them. So it's almost like Houston just fell to 3-5 with a loss today to Denver. I think 3-5. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And they have 2 guys, Sheldon Rankins and Tim Settle, both of them, Settle in particular, was outstanding against the Ravens. And I did notice that right in front of our seats, about 10 rows in front of us, was a row of 7 Settle jerseys in a row. So it's got to be his family.
Sure.
You otherwise could not arrange those to be together. But he was very dominant in the game, and they were going nuts. He'd be, I think, a pretty fabulous addition for the Ravens if they could get him. And he only has 1.1 million left on his contract, and it is expiring, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, he's on the final year. I think he's got 500,000 worth of per game roster bonuses, so it's gonna, you're gonna take half of those, so it's another 250, so it's not a big number there. Yeah, I don't know. Houston obviously thought they were going to not be 3-5, similar to the Ravens. So, but the Colts are much further out in front, even with their loss today. So, I would be surprised if Houston sells, but you never know if this is a guy. They can't ask a lot for either of these guys, but and I don't know what kind of draft capital they have on their own of their own next year. If they're short on draft picks, then they might want to unload a guy or two.
Right. So anyway, a couple guys there, some potential run defenders. But when I look at the interior defensive lineman, I want somebody who will pair up with Travis Jones to give the Ravens a good. Doesn't have to be great. It was great before with Matabike and Jones, but it could be just good with, say, a Settle and Jones on third down, instead of Taven Bryan and Jones, which is quite weak, in my opinion, of what they're putting out there. Or even worse, that Jones is the only lineman they can even afford to put on the field on third down. They don't have enough outside linebackers to fill it.
Right.
So they've been using Trenton Simpson as kind of a roving pass rusher on some of those dime snaps. This is another example of, Orr has got just almost no tools in his box right now to work with.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, and it doesn't sound like Broderick Washington's going to be back anytime soon. Not that he was playing super anyway, but and he's probably a guy that will not be on the team next year one way or another. But it'd be nice, at this point, bodies.
Right.
You need some bodies in there. So yeah, and we'll see what. I mean, I guess that's basically the only reinforcement they potentially have at this point on the roster.
Talk about 2 other names. I've got some other names. I'm going to go over them with Voss on the show tomorrow. But Carl Granderson of the Saints, big no to me, but he has a contract that's actually still got a lot of money left on it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see. I don't know that he moves the needle at all. Other than a warm body, because as you said, they basically have 3 edges. But I would think in that case, while he is younger, I mean, I think that's a case where you'd want a guy like Matt Judon than somebody like Granderson probably. And Judon would probably come. I mean, the compensation's probably similar.
And the most exciting name of all, I think, to Ravens fans, quite possibly of all. I mean, you talk about Max Crosby, everybody realizes you have to pay a price for Max Crosby, or for, if somehow Myles Garrett were for sale,
Right.
or Brian Burns, or any of those guys, or Jalen Phillips for that matter. But the guy that is cheap and everybody thinks would be great again in Baltimore is Calais Campbell.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing really well. I mean, he's playing at a high rate still. He's 39. So, I mean, there you're looking at, another, up 5th, and then get a 6th or 7th back, or a 6th, somewhere in that range. I mean, the Ravens got him for a 5th back in 2000 or 2020. Think about that. And, when he's still playing at a high level. Miami, for whatever reason, didn't want to deal him last year. And because it sounded like the Ravens were very much in to try to get him. So whether it changes now because he's in Arizona where he started his career, and the idea of starting and finishing there, so maybe he doesn't want to move again. But it is, this probably could be his last shot at getting to the playoffs and going somewhere. And certainly, there's a better shot here in Baltimore than Arizona. So. So I mean I think that if you say which one is going to happen, that's probably the one that you could probably put the most stock in. Not saying it's going to happen, but the odds are probably the best on that one.
Yeah. And as far as when I hear the, finishing in there, that's what one-day contracts are for.
Right.
2029, when he's finally hanging them up for good,
Right.
he can go back there for a day. But Calais Campbell, unbelievably, he's aged like no player in recent memory in
Yeah.
terms of being able to play this late as a defensive lineman. All right. Well, Brian, outstanding. Always great. And really talk about some of the elements of what's required fiscally, what even makes sense for the Ravens. I think it was really important for folks to hear around the trade deadline. And people just right now, Twitter is filled with people who say, so-and-so a name, make it happen.
Right.
And sometimes it's still a wide receiver at this point. What's
Right.
going on, folks?
Right. Well, I think wide receiver will always be a thing here. I don't know, no matter how many we have, it will always be, we need more, we need more, we need more. That just from our poverty years, I guess,
Yeah.
we're still shell shocked from that, or I don't know if that's shell shock, probably not the right word, but yeah, I mean, the thing is, even with some of the bigger names, if it is, if it got to a point like a Burns, which again I don't think is going to happen, but even some of the the Jalen Phillipses, they've got the cap space to make it happen. So that's that's a good thing. And the cost in the past, has always said the years he didn't have the cap space, it was really hard on him because he wanted to. He saw some options or some possibilities. Well, this year, hopefully there's some options out there that they can make happen because they certainly have the cap space to get 2 or 3 guys if it went that far. I don't think they're going to get 3 big names, obviously, but certainly they've got the ability to go get somebody for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, it is a different kind of position for the Ravens, and unfortunately, they're looking ahead to a tumultuous offseason in terms of a lot of potential departures, and they need to sign some of these guys. I mean, Travis Jones, he's just starting to make it happen right now. This last game might have been his best as a Raven, and boy, it would be nice if they could get him signed. Boy, would
Yeah.
it be nice if they could, sign Isaiah Likely after the game he just had.
Mhm.
Linderbaum's played 2 good games in a row now. Now he's really, in my mind, reopened the door on
Mhm.
possibly signing with the Ravens. I know, a lot of people think that it was a certainty all along. I'm not so sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, they will have, the franchise tag in their back pocket. That's really expensive for
Likely.
him. Likely would be the more likely candidate for that, I would think, just because tight ends aren't as expensive. The money has certainly gone up in the last couple of years, but that if there is somebody who's going to get tagged, if they need to keep that tag, I would think it'd be likely. But yeah, I mean, I really thought they would have gotten somebody done. I mean, they obviously got Hamilton done right before the season, but I really thought there was going to be one other. And of the 3 names, I really thought that it was going to be Likely or Jones.
Mhm.
That would be the one. I thought Linderbaum was probably going to have to wait, um, but yeah, but obviously at this point, I think it's probably unlikely. I mean, they often get somebody done at the end, but the bigger the name, it's harder to do. It's usually a kind of under the radar kind of guy. Um, Now, I mean, they did Roquan and, as we've mentioned earlier, Marcus Peters, but that was kind of different because they just acquired them. Um, and they got Chuck Clark done, and those kinds of the smaller moves
Mike
towards
Pierce.
the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you're a guy like Jones or Linderbaum or Likely, and why sign in December when the free market is there in March?
Mhm.
Unless, I mean, I guess you could go to Likely and say, look, we're going to tag you and let's get this done. Let's get this done now. We'll pay you handsomely. Well, let's get this done, or you're going to sit on the tag next year, and nobody wants that. So, I mean, I guess that's an option there. But yeah, I really did think they'd get one more done, at least one more done before the season started.
If Likely had to do it again, knowing what he did about the pending injury and whatnot that was coming, which obviously, hey, we all would love to go back and reinvest in some stock that was, about to go up and whatnot. But would Likely have signed the reported offer for $13 million a year or $13 million of AAV?
Yeah, I mean, the rumor was he was asking for much higher than that.
Mhm.
Now, yeah, now of course, he has had some injury history, so I don't know how that factors into, a free agent deal. I'm sure he was expecting to be more, used more, and obviously he's, just really getting back to it after breaking the foot. So, um, but it definitely, I mean, I think that could hinder his value because he was probably expecting to see a lot more. And there's just too many wide receivers in a way, or receivers, not just wide receivers, but too many mouths to feed. So he's not
Mhm.
going to see big numbers here this year. Um, so how that affects his value, who knows? So I mean, that's one they could go back and maybe get done, because if they were close enough, they can find maybe after, not seeing numbers that he was expecting, and to be able to go and, go like this and say, hey everybody, look at me. He's
Mhm.
not going to have that in March unless something drastically changes over the last 8 games.
Right. Right. All right. And maybe the Ravens play a couple playoff games. Maybe that would do
Right.
it, but
Right.
he'd be gambling on himself. The other thing about the playoffs for the Ravens looming is that a player like Linderbaum, say at the beginning of December, or likely, or Travis Jones for that matter, is not really as close to free agency as he seems to be. And so if you have an extra 2 or 3 games that you might have to play in the playoffs, before you're at free agency. So I always say every week passes is getting them a week closer to kind of the finish line and
Oh
free
yeah.
agency. But yeah, it's every game you play.
Yeah.
All right. Brian, always a pleasure talking football with you. Tell folks where they can find your work.
Sure. So, articles at on Russell Street Report, and then breaking news, that kind of stuff is on X. Anytime something happens, obviously the Alexander trade, soon as that, came across, I try to get the numbers together. I did mess that one up. It's 1 million in savings, not two. I
Mhm.
had in my head that it was just a $4 million fully guaranteed salary, but it was a
Two
2 million
plus 2.
bonus, and so it was only 1 million in savings. But they got the draft pick for it, and so again, fingers crossed they don't need an extra corner at some point.
Yeah.
That would be problematic. So, but I think they've been good. They've been good over the years about moving guys who I mean, Alexander apparently has been, by all reports, was a great teammate, didn't complain, didn't, anything like that. But it sounds like, I mean, did you see Chuck Pagano's post? I know you were in Miami. I don't know when you got back, but
Yeah, we got
um,
we were in Miami for 13 hours, but no, I did not
oh
see Chuck
wow.
Pagano's post. What was
Yeah,
it?
he posted just a real nice, great guy, totally respectful, go get him, pleasure to coach you, just kind of nice,
Nice.
sorry we couldn't find more time for you, just that kind of stuff. But it was real nice. So it seemed like it was well liked, and I think the Ravens, because apparently they had said no a couple times. Philly was coming after him for the last couple of weeks,
Hmm.
and the Ravens said no a few times. I don't remember who reported that. It might have been Rappaport, I think. But so it looks like they kind of decided, well, we're healthy enough at this point, and we're going to give you an opportunity to go somewhere where you're going to get some playing time, because he's looking at reestablishing his career at this point.
Yeah. And that's it's first of all, it's good to hear. That doesn't sound like the Tim Williams release or any of the other kind of salty ones where they were upset with the player's work ethic or whatever might be
Mhm.
going on. So that is good to hear, and it's also probably some good PR for Baltimore in terms of other
Yeah, I think
players.
for players, players appreciate that, and I'm sure that gets around that. They did him a solid, and things like that. So, if you're a free agent, look, trying to decide between places, Baltimore certainly seems to have a good reputation as far as the way they treat their players.
Now, it shouldn't. It shouldn't. It might not be the Ravens' problem that they gave the Eagles the final piece they needed. Just repeat
Well,
here, but
yeah, I mean that's the always, well, at least they got him out of the conference for one.
yeah,
So, but yeah, I mean, if you have to face him, you're not going to see him till the Super Bowl. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think they just did him a solid,
yeah.
and figured we're healthy enough at this point, and he doesn't play special teams, so it just, that kind of fit. in the roster, gymnastics. Just he wasn't a fit for what they needed. He was a great injury replacement, perhaps, but also if he's not getting on the field, you don't know what you're going to see. Practice. You don't always look the same from practice to stepping on the field.
And obviously something is up because he wasn't active, and TJ Tampa's active ahead of him, and players that you wouldn't normally expect. But we have to cut it off there.
Yep.
Other folks out there, thanks so much for listening as always. Appreciate you as listeners. Appreciate the fact that we don't have to take you for granted, and a lot of this kind of talk, particularly what Brian could bring in terms of nuances of the cap and whatnot, are not too much to explain on this show. Really appreciate that. Thanks for all your listening. Brian, thanks again for coming on.
Anytime.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.